I'm Rebecca Winters, 30 years old, and last night at our family dinner, my sister looked me square in the eye and said, "You have 3 days to get out." Her voice, calm, cold, like she was reading off a script. Mom flinched but said nothing. Dad just folded his napkin and stared at the floor across the table, sat a manila envelope and a set of keys that used to be mine. In that moment, the house I'd loved since childhood became a battlefield, and the people who once called me family chose silence instead of standing by me. Before I tell you the rest, let me know where you're listening from, and if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, hit that like and subscribe button. I was born and raised in Greenwich, Connecticut, in a colonial home with white shutters and a porch swing. Grandma Eleanor insisted on repainting every spring she lived with us during my childhood and kept a rose garden that wrapped around the side yard like a secret tunnel of color and thorns, she used to say. That roses teach you patience and loyalty because beauty without roots doesn't last. I carried those words with me all through college. Cornell was hard, but I worked for every grade, every scholarship. After graduation, I joined Morgan Stanley and climbed steadily for 6 years. Our office overlooked the Sound, and for a long time, I thought I'd made it. But 3 months ago, everything shifted. They called us into a conference room with bottled water already set at each seat. The department was closing. They said restructuring my role was no longer needed. My savings went faster than I'd planned, so I did what I swore I'd never do. I packed up my life and moved back home. Mom made lasagna that first night, just like she used to on my birthday. Dad carried my boxes upstairs and told me the guest room still had my high school comforter folded at the end of the bed. They told me I could stay as long as I needed family supports. Family, they said, and I believed them. Amber stopped by 2 days later. She hugged Mom in the doorway and barely glanced in my direction. "You back for long?" she asked, without waiting for an answer. We were never close. Amber was younger but always ahead in everyone's eyes, the better smile, the louder applause, the neater story. She married Harrison Chapman 3 years ago, the kind of man who wore cufflinks on weekends and ordered wine in French. Their wedding was in the society pages. I was there, but I might as well have been the florist. Our parents called Amber driven. They called me steady. They meant dependable, quiet, forgettable grandma. Eleanor never saw it that way. She always said I had staying power. She'd slip me notes in the pages of her gardening books or whisper praise when no one else was around. When she died 2 months ago, I thought the last person who really saw me was gone. I didn't notice right away, but things began to change in the house. Whispers stopped when I entered a room. Mail never arrived when it should. Have Dad spent more time in his study with the door closed? Mom started avoiding long conversations, and Amber suddenly had a reason to drop by. Every few days, then came the invitation, a formal dinner. 7 o'clock Grandma's roast on the menu. When I walked into the dining room that night, everything was too polished. The good china was out. The place cards were handwritten, and I was seated with my back to the window instead of my usual spot. Amber walked in wearing a sharp black dress like she was about to give a presentation. Harrison followed, buttoned up and glancing at his watch by dessert. I was too tense to eat. Then Amber pulled the envelope from her purse, slid it across the table, and said, "The house is mine now." The room went quiet except for the sound of Grandma's old clock ticking behind me. Mom's eyes welled up, but she said nothing. Dad reached for his water glass. I looked at them both and knew this wasn't a mistake. This was a decision, and I wasn't part of it. Didn't sleep that night. The house was still and dark, but every creak in the floorboard sent my heart racing. I kept waiting for someone to knock on my door to explain to take it back, but no one came. Just after 3 in the morning, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened my laptop. The number in my bank account stared back at me. $1,287.32. Not even enough for first and last month's rent, in most places around here. I scrolled through rental listings anyway. Studio apartments started at $1,800, and everyone required proof of income. I didn't have the next. Morning, I heard soft movement downstairs. I pulled on yesterday's sweater and walked into the kitchen. Mom stood at the counter stirring pancake batter like nothing had happened. Her eyes were puffy. She looked up and flinched slightly when she saw me. "How could you let this happen?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow. She dropped the spoon batter splattered on the counter. "We didn't have a choice," she said quietly. "There's always a choice. I told her. You chose Amber again? Dad walked in just then. He was already dressed for his usual Saturday morning golf game. He poured his coffee in slow motion, not looking at either of us. "The will is binding," he said. "We talked to our attorney. There's nothing we can do now. You could speak up," I said. "You could tell her it's wrong. You could tell her this isn't what Grandma would have wanted." Dad finally looked at me. His voice was flat. "Your grandmother made her decision." "I don't believe that," I said. Not for a second. He didn't answer. Instead, they exchanged glances. Mom wiped the counter with a towel that was already soaked through. "Amber and Harrison offered to let us stay in the house," Mom said finally, "until we're ready to move to something smaller." I stared at her. "So you gave me up to secure your retirement." "It's not that simple," Dad said. But it was. It really was. I turned and went back to my room, closed the door, and started packing around 7:30. I called Nancy. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was groggy. I told her everything. Every word of it scraped at my throat. "Come stay with me," she said without hesitation. "It's not much. It's just a couch. But it's yours as long as you need it." The relief was sudden and sharp, but it didn't last. Nancy's apartment in Stamford was barely 600 square feet. I'd still need a plan, a job, a way forward. I filled out job applications until my fingers cramped one after the other. Each one required references and salary expectations. I dropped my asking price each time I tried to call a few legal aid offices, but the hold times were long, the websites vague. I didn't have money for a lawyer, and even if I did, I didn't know where to begin late that afternoon. While sorting through old books in my closet, I opened a drawer and found a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Grandma Eleanor's handwriting on every envelope. Her words pulled me back to college dorms and holiday breaks. She always signed with the same line, "You are more than enough." The phone rang an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Is this Rebecca Winters?" A soft voice on the other end. "Yes, this is Mildred Henshaw." "I was a friend of your grandmother's. We were in the garden club together for years." I blinked. "It's good to hear from you," I said, "though I didn't know you had my number. I've been trying to reach you since the funeral," she said. "Your mother told me you weren't taking calls." "I'm so glad I found your number in Eleanor's old address book." I didn't speak, just listened. "There's something not right about the will," she said. "Your grandmother told me she wanted you to have the house. She was very clear about it." My chest tightened. "I thought so too," I said, "but apparently she changed her mind. Or someone changed it for her." Mildred replied. "She told me Grandma had been forgetful near the end, not herself, and that she often spoke about me always with love, always with intention. Would you be willing to meet tomorrow?" I asked. "I just want to understand what happened." Of course, she said, Eleanor would want me to help. We agreed on the Bluebird Cafe downtown. It had been Grandma's favorite. We used to go there for hot chocolate after school. The next morning I arrived 10 minutes early. The place still looked the same. Wood-paneled walls, mismatched chairs, smelled like cinnamon and coffee grounds. Mildred was already seated, silver hair tucked neatly pink, lipstick carefully applied. She looked like someone who never left the house without matching earrings. "You look just like her," she said. When I sat down, "Eleanor always said you had her fire." We ordered coffee, and Mildred got straight to it. 2 months before she died, she said we sat at this very table. She had just updated her will and was thrilled, said she was leaving the house to you. I held my breath, she said. Amber would get her investment portfolio. She wanted things to be fair. But the house was yours. She was proud of you. Said you loved that home for what it meant, not for what it was worth. Then why did she change it, I asked. That's just it, Mildred said. There was a new lawyer involved. Bradford something, slick young man, showed up during her final weeks. She was on heavy medication, not always lucid. I wrote the name down, Bradford. Thornton, yes, that's it. Not like Lawrence, her old attorney. Lawrence would never have let this happen. I asked if she'd be willing to put any of this in writing. She didn't hesitate. I'd do anything for Eleanor. And for you. That afternoon, I went to the library. I didn't want to search from the house computer. Too many eyes, too many risks. Bradford Thornton had a polished website estate, planning for high-net-worth clients. Then I found something else, an old business journal photo. Harrison standing beside Bradford at an awards gala, longtime advisor and friend. The caption read, My fingers trembled. I dug deeper on Amber's old social media. I found a photo from a yacht party. Amber, Harrison, and Bradford, laughing, tagged Business and Pleasure, posted just weeks before Grandma passed. Everything clicked at once. That night, I waited until my parents left for their bridge game. I slipped into Dad's study, typed in Mom's birthday. The password hadn't changed. His inbox was open. I scrolled fast, then stopped there. They were emails between Dad, Amber, and Bradford discussing the new will, making sure Rebecca stays in the dark, promising Dad and Mom a place to stay once the house was transferred. I downloaded everything to a flash drive, then opened a folder labeled Eleanor Medical. Her doctor had written, "Patient often disoriented and confused. Questionable capacity for major decisions." And yet that's when the new will was signed. Beneath those files was a financial report. Amber and Harrison's business was underwater, multiple foreclosures. They needed the house for collateral. I was still sitting at Dad's desk, documents open, when I heard the garage door. They were home early. Mom froze in the doorway when she saw the screen. Dad's voice went sharp. "Rebecca, what are you doing?" "Reading the truth," I said. "You lied to me. You lied to everyone." They didn't deny it. The only thing they said was that they thought I'd be fine, that Amber needed the help more, and that they didn't want to lose the house. I didn't say much after that. I just took the flash drive and walked upstairs. Their voices faded behind me. I sat on my bed staring at nothing until the sun went down, and then I started to make a plan. I didn't sleep that second night either. I sat on the floor of my bedroom with boxes half filled and my suitcase open beside me. The dresser drawers were mostly empty. I couldn't decide what to keep, what to leave. Every item had a memory attached: debate team trophies, photo strips from college, a dusty bookshelf with Grandma's gardening guides. Nothing seemed important until I had to walk away from it. The room felt different now, not like a place I'd grown up in, but like borrowed space. I had to tiptoe through. I kept glancing at the door as if someone might suddenly come in and change everything no one did around. Noon, I made myself go downstairs. The kitchen was quiet. A note on the counter said they were out running errands. I didn't believe it. They were avoiding me, same as the day before. I poured a glass of water and sat at the table where the dinner had taken place. The crystal glasses were gone, the good napkins folded and stored, but I could still feel the tension in the room. The front door opened. "Just me." Amber's voice rang out. She stepped into the kitchen, sunglasses pushed on top of her head, lipstick too bright for a casual visit. "Thought I'd check how the packing was going," she said, her tone casual, but her eyes scanned the room like she was already taking measurements. "Don't pretend you're here to be helpful," I said. She sighed. "I'm trying to be civil. It doesn't have to be ugly." I set my glass down. "You're evicting me." "What version of this isn't ugly?" She leaned against the counter. "Technically, I gave you 3 days. Most owners wouldn't be that generous." I looked at her. "I'm not a tenant. I'm your sister." Amber shrugged. "I'm planning to gut this kitchen," she said. "Harrison found a contractor who does amazing gourmet spaces. This whole setup is outdated. The cabinets were only 10 years old. Grandma had picked every tile herself." I didn't answer. Amber looked down at her watch. "The movers will be here Monday. We're keeping the dining set and a few pieces from the study. It would be awkward if you were still here." She turned and walked out without waiting for a response. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat there until the ice melted in my glass that night. I didn't try to pack. I couldn't instead. I wandered the hallway, stood outside Grandma's old room, touched the banister where she used to hang her gardening hat, then locked myself in the bathroom and sat on the cold tile floor. My arms wrapped around my knees. I didn't cry. Not at first, but when the sobs came, they didn't stop. My body shook. My breath came in short gasps. I reached for the edge of the tub just to steady myself. It was the kind of crying that emptied you. My fingers brushed against the gold chain around my neck. I touched the locket. Grandma Eleanor's. I hadn't taken it off since the funeral. I opened it slowly inside. Was the photo of us in her rose garden. I was maybe 8 years old, laughing, covered in dirt. She had her arms around me. I stared at it for a long time until another memory surfaced. I was 16, sitting with her outside, asking why Amber always seemed to hate me. She told me some people are scared of not having enough of love, attention, certainty, and that fear makes them grab for more even when they already have plenty, she said. But you know how to share space to grow without taking from someone else. That's the difference, Rebecca, and it will matter one day. The bathroom clock read 3:17 a.m. I stood washed. My face looked in the mirror. My eyes were red, my hair tangled. But something had shifted. I couldn't change what they'd done, but I could decide what I would do next. I pulled out a notebook from my bag and started writing everything I knew, every date, every email, every strange interaction. By sunrise, I had 4 pages of notes, a timeline, and a list of names. Nancy texted just after 8, checking in. "Anything you need. I need help fighting back," I wrote. "Are you still with me?" Her response came immediately. "Absolutely. Whatever it takes." I left the house at 9. The legal aid office was above a dry cleaner in Stamford. I sat in the waiting room for nearly an hour. People came and went, some quietly, some frustrated, some looking just as lost as I felt. A woman in her 40s called my name. She wore simple glasses, hair pulled back in a bun. "Monica Rodriguez," she said, offering a hand. "Let's talk her." Office was small. 2 chairs, a desk, stacked folders along the wall. I explained everything. Grandma's sudden will changed the emails, the medical records, Amber's financial mess, the pressure on my parents. Monica didn't interrupt. She listened carefully, and when I finished, she leaned back and said, "This is serious." She used words like undue influence, testamentary capacity, and elder abuse. "Can you help me?" I asked. "Our clinic can't represent you in a case like this," she said, "but you may be able to find a private attorney who will take this on contingency. Your evidence is strong." She drafted a letter to formally contest the will. It would freeze any transfers until the court reviewed everything. She also told me to document every conversation, every message starting. Now I thanked her, then walked outside and sat on the curb for a moment. The letter felt heavy in my bag, but I didn't feel helpless anymore. That afternoon I called Lawrence Phillips. Grandma's original attorney, he was retired, but when I told him my name, he remembered immediately. Eleanor was clear. He said she wanted you to have that house. She told me several times. I was surprised when I heard she switched attorneys. Mildred helped connect me with other garden club members. 3 of them had heard Grandma say the same thing. One still had a birthday card. Grandma sent her. It mentioned making sure Rebecca always has a place to call home by Sunday night. The 3rd day of Amber's deadline, I had copies of everything ready to be used. When I pulled into the driveway, Amber's car was already there. It was time Amber and Harrison were in the living room when I walked through the door. He was flipping through paint samples. She was standing by the fireplace with her arms crossed. They looked up when they saw me. Amber frowned. "I thought you'd be finishing your packing," she said. "Change of plans," I told her. "I've called a family meeting. Mom and Dad should be home soon." "We don't have time for this," Harrison started. I held up a folder and met his eyes. "Make time. Unless you'd prefer I take this to the district attorney." Amber's posture stiffened. Harrison didn't speak again. 20 minutes later, my parents walked in. They paused in the entryway, seeing the 4 of us seated in silence. "What's going on?" Dad asked. Amber gave a tight smile. "Rebecca's called a meeting. She thinks this is still up for debate." I stood, "No debate, just truth. And consequences." I opened the folder on my lap, took a deep breath, and began. I laid out everything I'd gathered over the past 48 hours. The emails between Dad Amber and Bradford Thornton. Grandma Eleanor's medical records showing confusion during her final weeks. The connection between Bradford and Harrison. The social media photo on the yacht. The garden club witnesses the birthday card. The note from Lawrence Phillips. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. I just let the facts speak. Harrison tried to interrupt. "This is circumstantial," he said. But I noticed his hand was trembling, his shirt collar damp. "Tell it to the judge," I said. "I've filed a formal contest. No one's transferring anything until this is settled in court." Amber's jaw clenched. Her voice shook slightly. "You have no idea what you're doing." "I think I do," I said. "You needed this house, not because you loved it, but because you were drowning." She flinched at that. Then something shifted. Her mask cracked. "It's not fair," she said. "You always had the grades." The praised Grandma's attention. I had to fight for everything. And still she stopped herself. I waited. "This house should be mine," she said quietly. "So you manipulated someone who was dying?" I asked. "You took advantage of her when she was weak. She didn't even recognize me near the end," Amber said. "Half the time she thought I was her sister. It didn't matter anymore." Mom gasped softly. Even Harrison looked away. "Is that what you told yourselves?" I asked. "That it didn't matter, that you deserved it more because she was slipping away?" Amber didn't respond, but her hands were balled tightly in her lap. I reached into my bag, pulled out a small voice recorder, set it on the coffee table. "I spoke to Bradford this morning. I said he admitted the methods he used, the timing, how he visited when Grandma was at her worst. It was a lie I hadn't spoken to Bradford, but they didn't know that." Amber turned white. Harrison sat up straight. "You're bluffing," Harrison said, but he didn't sound sure. "We'll hear it," I said. "If it comes to that in court." Harrison looked at Amber, his jaw tight, his fingers tapping his knee. Then he stood. "Amber, hallway, now." They left the room. We could hear their muffled voices on the other side of the door. Angry. Panicked. My parents sat frozen. Dad stared at the rug. Mom kept wiping her eyes. "Did he really admit that?" Dad asked. "Finally, does it matter?" I said. "You know what happened. You all do. The question is, are you going to keep pretending, or are you going to make it right?" Before either of them answered, Amber and Harrison came back in. She looked deflated, her shoulders hunched, her face pale. "Fine," she said. "Contest the will. Drag us through court. Make it public. Is that what you want?" "I want the truth on record," I said. "I want Grandma's wishes honored." Amber dropped onto the couch, her voice low. "We're broke," she said. "Harrison's last 3 deals failed. We've been living off credit cards. We needed the house. We were out of time." Harrison didn't speak, just stood behind her with his arms crossed. Mom's head turned sharply toward them. Dad looked stunned. "It wasn't supposed to get this far," Amber said. "Bradford said it would be simple. Clean. No one would question it." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Mom finally spoke. "What happens now?" "That's up to you," I said. "Are you willing to tell the truth, or should we let a judge decide?" No one answered right away. The room was still quiet, like the air itself was waiting. The days after that family meeting passed in a blur. Amber stormed out. First, Harrison followed after a tense pause. Dad stayed seated, his eyes on the fireplace. Mom sat across from me, silent hands folded like she was bracing for impact. No one said much after that, but the silence felt different now, less like avoidance, more like reckoning. The next morning, I called Monica Rodriguez. I told her everything that happened. She told me to stay put. "You're within your rights to remain in the house during the legal process." She said the court will likely appoint a temporary estate administrator while the matter is reviewed. I printed copies of the contest letter, hand-delivered one to my parents, one to Amber, and one to Harrison's office. They didn't respond, but I saw Amber's car leave the driveway the following afternoon, with boxes packed into the trunk. Nancy came over that evening with groceries. She hugged me hard. "Emotional warfare requires carbs," she said, then handed me a bag of pasta and 2 bottles of wine. We sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Amber had first told me to leave. Nancy listened as I told her the full story. Not just the facts, but the small moments. The look on my dad's face when I showed him the emails. The sound of Mom crying behind a closed door. When I finished, Nancy reached across the table and took my hand. "You're not alone," she said. "You never were." A few days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Michael Tran, a former client from Morgan Stanley. He'd heard about the layoffs and wanted to meet. We sat at a cafe near the river. He offered me a position at his new firm, small team focused on ethical investments. The pay wasn't what I'd made before, but the mission aligned with everything I'd come to believe mattered. I said yes before the coffee cooled. It felt like the first step forward that didn't come from fighting, just choosing. The following week, I found a therapist. Her name was Dr. Claire Winters. No relation. She specialized in family dynamics. We met in a modest office with soft lighting and a small window that faced a park. In our second session, I told her what happened. She listened quietly, then said, "What your family did was wrong." It's okay to call it that. I sat with that for a long time. No one else had said it so plainly. Dad dropped off coffee one morning. He left it on the porch with a note that said, "I'm sorry. When you're ready to talk, I'm here." Mom texted a few times, short messages asking if I needed anything. I didn't respond right away. Eventually, we met in the park where we used to have picnics, the same one we'd visit after Sunday church when I was little. The conversation wasn't easy. They tried to explain, said they were scared of confrontation, scared of losing their home, scared of choosing sides. "We chose wrong," Dad said, "and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I told them I didn't know if trust could be rebuilt, but I was open to trying on my terms with boundaries. They agreed to counseling all of us as a family and individually. The progress was slow, but real. Amber didn't reach out for almost 2 months. I heard through Mildred that she'd moved in with our aunt in New Jersey. Harrison had filed for divorce. Their business had collapsed completely. The text came on a quiet Friday evening. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'd like to talk on your terms." I waited a few days, then said yes. We met at the Bluebird Cafe. She looked different. No makeup, hair pulled back, a plain sweater instead of the usual designer outfit. "I've been in therapy," she said. "A lot of therapy." She talked about comparison, about chasing success, about never feeling good enough. "I convinced myself that if I had what you had, I'd finally feel worthy," she said. "And did you never?" she whispered. There was always something else to take, always someone else to beat. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just sat for a while. The silence between us no longer full of tension, just room. We agreed to meet again once a month. Coffee only, no expectations. 3 months after the meeting, in the living room, the court invalidated the second will. The judge ruled that the original document stood. The house belonged to me. The rest of the estate, including financial assets, would be divided between Amber and me, as Grandma Eleanor had intended. Mom and Dad received a few designated items: a quilt, a set of heirloom dishes, and a letter. I never read it. They never offered. I spent that afternoon in the garden. The roses were blooming yellow and blush pink. I stood near the trellis Grandma had planted years ago, the sun warm on my shoulders, the wind soft. "I kept my promise," I whispered. I stayed. The house felt different after the court decision. Lighter, somehow, like it had exhaled. I walked through each room with a slow steadiness, touching door frames, adjusting pictures, noticing how quiet the walls had become. The formal dining room, where Amber had slid the envelope across the table, was now empty. I'd already decided it would become a home office. The dark cherry furniture was gone. The shadows no longer clung to the corners. Nancy helped me repaint the walls. We picked a pale cream with soft blue undertones, the kind of color that caught the morning sun without shouting. She brought over muffins and a gallon of iced tea. We worked in comfortable silence, music playing low in the background. "Feels like you're claiming it back," she said. I nodded, 1 room at a time at work. Things were steady. The pace was different than what I was used to. But better? I liked the quiet mission behind every investment, helping people grow something meaningful, not just turn a profit. My team was small, 4 of us in a shared space. We ate lunch together, most days, laughed about client quirks, traded recipes. No one asked where I came from or why I kept glancing at my phone like I was waiting for something, doctor. Winters and I met weekly. She asked careful questions. Let silence linger when it needed to. You're allowed to take up space. She told me once, even in your own story, I wasn't sure I'd ever needed to hear anything more than that. Mom and Dad didn't push. They sent messages, small gestures, a casserole on the porch, a basket of apples from the orchard. Each came with a handwritten note. Never too long, never asking for anything. We met at the therapist's office twice. Both times were hard. Dad struggled to speak without retreating into long explanations. Mom cried quietly. They owned their part. They didn't try to justify. And for the first time, I believed they might actually understand. Amber stayed away. I got the occasional text, brief updates about her job search, a recipe she found in Grandma's old book. Sometimes just thinking of you. I never replied right away. Sometimes I didn't reply at all. It wasn't anger anymore, just space. 2 months passed. Then one Sunday, a letter arrived in a plain white envelope postmarked from Jersey. No return name inside a photo taken years ago in Grandma. Eleanor's garden, me and Amber sitting on a blanket surrounded by roses. our heads bent together laughing at something unseen on the back Amber had written. She believed in both of us. I stared at it for a long time, then tucked it into a drawer. Spring came early that year. The roses began to bud, and I started thinking about how to honor the space, not just protect it. I remembered what Grandma always said. A house is only as generous as the people inside it. So I made a few calls, looked into permits, talked with the local women's shelter, and spent an afternoon with Mildred, who still carried her garden gloves in her purse. "Your grandmother would have liked this," she said. "Not just what you're doing, but why." A few weeks later, I hosted a small gathering in the sunroom. Fresh paint, refinished floors, flowers in mason jars, simple finger food, and soft music. Nancy stood near the window talking with a neighbor I'd just met. My parents arrived together. They moved carefully through the space, grateful to be included but still respectful of boundaries. Dr. Winters came too, brought lemon bars and her quiet smile. When the room settled, I tapped my glass and cleared my throat. "Thank you all for being here," I said. "This house has seen a lot. Joy loss, hard truths." I paused, but also grace and change and something like healing. I told them about the new plans, how the East Wing would be renovated into 3 private suites, a short-term transitional space for women coming out of crisis, somewhere safe, quiet with structure and support. Nancy squeezed my arm. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Mildred nodded slowly, her hands folded in her lap. I named it the Eleanor Winters Foundation after the guests left. I stood in the garden, the early blooms just starting to open. Dad joined me carrying a small trowel and a bundle of new rose starters. "Thought maybe we could plant these together," he said. I handed him the gloves from the porch hook as we worked. He told me about the week after the dinner, how hard it had been to sit in the silence, how much he wished he'd spoken up sooner. "I thought I was protecting your mother," he said. "But I failed both of you. I see that now. I didn't say much, but I didn't stop him either." As the last rose went into the soil, he looked over at me. "You've made this place more than what it was. Even Grandma would say." That I nodded. "I just wanted to come home and know it was mine, not because it was given, but because I built something inside it." 3 weeks after the garden was replanted, I got a text from Amber. "Could we talk again? I'll drive to you. Just coffee. No pressure." I read it twice, then set my phone down without replying. But that evening after dinner, I typed back, "Bluebird Cafe. Friday at 2. The same corner table was open when I arrived. Amber was already there. She looked smaller somehow. Not in size, just quieter, like something in her had finally settled. She wore a plain blouse and flats, no jewelry, no polish. Her hands rested on the table, still for once. "Thanks for meeting me," she said. Her voice was low, a little rough. I nodded. We ordered coffee, sat in silence until the drinks arrived. "I wanted to tell you something," she said, "and I wanted to say it face to face." I waited. "I got a job," she said, a real one this time. "Not networking lunches and press kits." She smiled faintly. "I'm a paralegal now, working with a nonprofit legal aid group in Trenton." I raised my eyebrows. She caught the look. "Yes." Irony noted. She sipped her coffee, then continued. "Turns out when you lose everything, you start asking different questions like who you are, what you want, what kind of legacy you're leaving behind." I listened. She didn't ramble, just spoke. Measured like she'd rehearsed it, but not in a performative way. I used to think if I just got the next thing, the next title, next win, I'd feel better. She shrugged, but it never stuck. I nodded once. She looked at me, her gaze steady, and said, "You were right about Grandma about everything." I didn't say anything back. I didn't need to. We talked a bit more not long. Nothing deep, but something had shifted before we parted. She hesitated, then asked, "Would it be okay if I visited the garden when the roses bloom again?" I thought about it, then said, "We'll see. Ask me in the spring." A few days later, I found myself cleaning the attic boxes, old books, photo albums I hadn't seen in years. I opened one of Grandma's favorite novels. Tucked inside the back cover was a small envelope, yellowed with time, my name written in her familiar handwriting. I sat on the floor and opened it. The letter inside was dated just weeks before she passed. She wrote about patterns she saw in the family, fears she had how much she loved me, how much she trusted me to do the right thing. Even if others didn't, she said she'd created a backup plan in case things didn't go as she hoped. There was a bank card account, details, instructions to contact a man named Walter Jenkins. At Greenwich National Bank, I made the call the next morning. Walter remembered her immediately. Met me in a quiet conference room at the branch. The account was real, and the balance was staggering, over $500,000 set aside. In my name, untouched. She wanted you to have this separate from anything tied to the will. Walter said her exact words were, "This is Rebecca's shelter in case storms come that she didn't cause." I left the bank in silence, walked slowly down the sidewalk, the sky bright, but everything around me felt still. That night, I sat in the sunroom, letter open on my lap, the bank card beside my tea. She'd known somehow, even before the documents changed, even before the maneuvering began. Grandma Eleanor had known what might happen, and she'd trusted me, not just with a house, but with a purpose. The next morning I met with the contractor again, finalized the plans for the East Wing, 3 private suites, common kitchen, counseling room, garden access. The foundation would launch quietly, one guest at a time. No press, no ribbon, cutting, just steady hands, open doors, and something to hold on to. The following week, Nancy came over with scones. I told her everything. The letter, the account, what it meant. She stared at me for a long moment, then reached across the table. "Your grandma knew exactly who you were," she said, "and now the rest of us do too." The foundation quietly opened its doors on a rainy Thursday in early May. I watched from the kitchen window as our first guest, a woman named Janice, with tired eyes and a battered suitcase, stepped onto the porch. Nancy met her at the door, offering a gentle smile and a mug of tea. No grand speeches, no spotlight, just a quiet welcome, a roof, and a safe place to begin again. That evening, after everyone had settled, I walked out into the garden. The roses were blooming yellow and pink, their petals shining with rain. For a long moment, I just stood there, breathing in the scent, listening to the soft hush of water on leaves. In that stillness, I felt the weight of the past season, the betrayals, the heartbreak, the hard-won forgiveness begin to fade into something softer, something I could carry without bitterness. My parents started coming by on weekends, always with some small offering. Homemade bread, a flat of marigolds, Dad's toolbox to help with a sticky window. Our conversations were different now, slower, more careful, sometimes awkward. But beneath it, a kind of honesty had taken root. We didn't pretend everything was healed, but we showed up and tried, and that was enough. Amber called on a Saturday afternoon. She asked if she could walk through the garden just for a little while. I said yes. She came alone, stopping beside the new trellis I'd built with Dad. For a while we just stood together in silence, watching the bees move from bloom to bloom. When she left, she turned and said thank you for not shutting me out. It wasn't an apology, but it didn't have to be. There are still quiet days when I walk through the house and feel the echoes of old arguments, of laughter, of all the people I've been in these rooms. Sometimes I find a note from Grandma Eleanor tucked in a book or a pressed flower in a kitchen drawer, and I remember how much love can outlast pain if you let it. Justice isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's the slow work of setting boundaries, telling the truth, and making a place in the world that's truly yours. Dignity is in every small choice to be kind, to forgive, and to grow past what you were given. If you've ever had to fight for your own corner of the world or lost faith in family and found it again, I hope you know you're not alone. There is quiet strength in starting over, in building something that will last beyond your own troubles. Thank you for listening to my story and for walking this path with me. If you found something here that speaks to you, I hope you'll share your own story or simply pass on a kindness to someone else who might need it. Sometimes, that's how healing begins.